Well, welcome to this latest edition of On Point. Last week, we talked about the DNC, the Democratic National Convention, its ups and downs, the promises made, can they be kept, so on and so forth, the highlights and takeaways. And of course, this week following up, bringing up the rear of the Republican National Convention. Both, again, were different and interesting because of the pandemic, the COVID-19. And then, of course, a lot of the stuff was virtual, a lot of stuff was taped, so on and so forth. A tale of two cities, a tale of, say, for instance, two different Americas, what we can expect. And the question is of who's telling the truth. It has been said that this has been, I guess perhaps we can all agree upon mostly, that this is going to be the most important election in the history of this country and the direction that we should or should not go in. So we're going to discuss the Republican National Convention, and of course we're going to bring in Eric Ham, of course, our regular, who's a best-selling author and political analyst out of Washington, D.C. Welcome, Eric. And then, of course, Jim Lawrence. Yes, it's Jim Lawrence, who's been on the show before. He is a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, a legislator who's ran for Congress, and he's also a conservative commentator. Jim, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Julian.
Okay, we just want to get straight into it here. There's a lot to cover here. A lot of stuff was said last night by President Trump. Let's just kind of forget about all the other speakers at this point and focus on the man front and center. A 70-minute speech, one of the longest ever, and he talked about a number of things. Some would suggest that what he said was largely not true. So let's talk about some of the things first. And let's go back to 2016 when he said he promised to build this wall. Last night he said that his administration constructed over 300 miles of wall. My question is that true? Jim, is it true?
Well, I don't know what the exact length of the construction of the wall. I haven't researched that site, but there has been construction going on our southern border, and they have built quite a few miles, a few hundred miles of border wall there to help secure that southern border. So if the president said he threw out a stat, he certainly knows more about what's going on with that current project than I would.
Okay. Eric?
No, the president is not right. And let me just give you the numbers because I actually have them. He has not built 300 miles of new wall. What he has done is he has refurbished existing wall that is already there. In fact, the amount of mileage of wall that he's actually built is actually a whopping 3 miles of wall. But for the most part, all of the money has been used to refurbish existing wall. And in fact, what he talks about is not even a wall that has even been refurbished. It's actually a fence.
Mm-hmm.
So no, that was not true what he said last night.
Yeah, my numbers are a lot smaller as well, and a lot of that have reconstructed parts of the existing wall already. And I guess the other thing is, too, the one thing that he did say in 2016 that he kept on harping on, is that Mexico was going to pay for this wall. I'm going to ask each of you, has Mexico paid for any or all a part of this wall, however little or much construction has been done?
Well, you know, this has been kind of a statement that's been swirling around. And the president did make that statement while he was campaigning in 2016. Is Mexico paying for the wall directly out of their budget? Absolutely not. However, what the president was referring to was the fact that if he were able to secure that southern border, that many of the costs that are incurred by trying to interdict illegal immigrants coming across the border and the burden that may be put on social systems here in the United States could be defrayed or deflected or significantly reduced. And that's still something that's potentially in play as we look to try and secure that southern border.
Eric?
Well, I think the president was emphatic that Mexico would pay for the wall. We knew Mexico was never going to pay for the wall. But not only has Mexico not paid for the wall, the president has actually had to be slapped down by the courts for actually taking appropriations that were not deemed to pay for the wall, that Congress actually appropriated for other things. For example, he wanted to take money out of military construction to pay for the war, wanted to take money from drug interdiction programs operated by the Pentagon to pay for this wall. And it was the courts that had to step in and say that the president was actually out of line, and those monies had to go back where Congress had appropriated them. In fact, it's against the law for the president to take monies that Congress have appropriated for other things and then to move them to his pet projects, his pet political projects. And he has to go back and get the permission of Congress. And it's amazing that the president was never able to do that because, again, remember, in the first 2 years of his administration, the Congress was actually controlled by his party, both the House and the Senate. So it's not an issue of when this wall is built, the social costs and all of this is going to be defrayed. That's pie in the sky stuff that, many, I think, Republicans just actually, bend over backwards to assuage what the president is saying. It simply isn't true. And also, I think we have to have an understanding of how, in fact, government works. And so the president, basically overpromised and underdelivered on this issue.
All right, let's
you can honestly say that he did not deliver on completing the wall, but you have to face facts. He was facing, after the Congress flipped to the Democratic Party, an obstructionist Congress, which is why he attempted to get creative with the appropriations of trying to build that wall. And I have to say that although Congress does have the power of the purse strings and they do pass the appropriation law, the president is the head of the administration, and basically the Department of Defense falls under his purview. They do have some discretion in terms of redirection of funds within the appropriations law. So this is something that we'll have to debate as it makes its way through the court systems and see which side actually is correct.
All right. Well, the bottom line is right now we do know, according to a number of sources, factcheck.org and a lot of other organizations here, that the wall has not been built like he wanted it to be built, and Mexico has not paid for it. That's really the bottom line here. Let's move on to some other subjects here in terms of what the president has promised and what he has delivered on. COVID-19. We saw last night that there were about anywhere from 1,500 to 2,000 people there. Most people were not wearing masks. The president did not make mention of the nearly 180,000 people that have died of COVID-19. And of course, now it's down to, I think, 900 per day, a little bit down, but really no mention of that. But basically saying that the government has done everything that they could possibly do and have been on top of that, despite the numbers here. One thing that he did say in the speech specifically, that the mortality rate in the United States is lower than any other country. Is that true, Eric?
No. And look, Julian, I think we need to talk about the bigger picture of what not only took place last night, but what took place this entire week. We know the president is prone to hyperbole. I mean, that's fine. We get it. We understand that. But for those of us, in Washington who watched this spectacle play out last night, this was basically criminal enterprise, coming out of the closet. This was autocratic, dictatorial, monarchical government simply run amok. We saw every member of the administration that was at this event was in clear violation of the Hatch Act. And even though the president and the vice president cannot be held accountable for the Hatch Act, they should at least honor the spirit of it. And we clearly did not see that last night. We're talking about the people's house. This is the White House, the people's house. And the president stood there and held a political convention that was meant to simply benefit him, to surround himself with the trappings of what it is that government of American democracy has afforded. This is not for him. This is for us. But what we saw was the president take himself and drape himself in what should be for the people, suggesting that now this is somehow belongs to him and not to the American people. And so I think while many people will not even understand or even know what the Hatch Act is or see anything wrong with what took place last night, What we saw last night was American democracy careening towards state failure. Because if this is a democracy, a nation of laws, what we saw last night was a clear break of that system. And what's on the ballot in November is not who people will vote for president. What's on the ballot in November is, will the United States be a democracy or an autocracy?
Well, Jim, let me just jump in for a second, and we can go back to that. And dealing with this COVID-19, the president has stated several times, and again last night, that he instituted this ban from China, travel ban from China, and in Europe. But by all accounts, that travel ban instituted, I think it was around February 2nd, specifically for China, was not really a ban, but a partial ban. And at that point in time, 36 other countries had also instituted bans. What is your response to that? And I also want you, of course, to respond to Eric when it comes to the Hatch Act.
Okay, well, certainly being a former member of the armed forces, I'm very well aware of the Hatch Act, as are many other people that serve in government in all capacities. And the one thing that I want to note about this is that right now we're in very unique times. This pandemic has thrown everything for a loop. And you can second guess the president's decision to decide to have part of the convention at the White House based on the Hatch Act. But the fact of reality is that wasn't his original intention. He had to shift gears midstream to try and come up with a solution that would help protect American lives during the pandemic and still allow him to go forward with some type of convention. I will grant you one piece in this. It is clearly in the gray area, but we can argue this all day long. The bottom line is we're in very unique times right now. And sometimes when you make judgment calls in unique times, you open yourself up to criticism from the other side. In terms of the mortality rate, I don't know what the president meant exactly, but I do know what the statistics show, and that is that the percentage of those who contract COVID-19 in the United States and actually die from it is significantly or substantially less than many of the other countries in the world. And I can only imagine that that is what the president was talking about, that because of our healthcare system, that we're able to save people's lives where other countries may not. I mean, you saw the pandemic spread through countries like Italy and Spain, and the percentage of those people who contracted COVID-19 and actually died from it were much, much higher than in the United States. So getting to the travel bans, if we remember when President Trump first banned travel from China, many in this country criticized him, called him xenophobic, called him a racist. Some of the similar taglines that we're hearing, the attacks from the left talking about the president's policies now. Nobody would say that now, but the president was trying to step forward and take the steps to protect Americans' lives. I wish he had done more.
Eric?
With all due respect, Jeff, you're just wrong on all of this. If the president was actually concerned about COVID and being able to put on a convention that actually took that into consideration, he wouldn't have had 1,000 people not wearing masks, no social distancing at the White House. He just wouldn't have done it. The Democrats held an all virtual convention. Do you realize that more people watched Kamala Harris' convention speech than watched Mike Pence? 6 million more people saw Mike Pence. But nevertheless, they put thousands of people in jeopardy over those nights. In fact, the number of people that was at Mike Pence's speech, the number of people that was at Donald Trump's speech, those are the number of people that the United States lost this week. In fact, it was more than that from COVID-19. 3,500 people have already died between Monday and Thursday from COVID-19. So if he was concerned about the well-being of people, he certainly wouldn't have had all of those people there. He could have actually just did it over the airwaves and had people watch it. But that's not what happened. So this idea about trying to be concerned about people's lives just doesn't hold water, because we have the evidence of what we saw take place over those 2 nights. This gray area, come on, man. Whose audience are you trying to sell with that? This audience? We've already made clear that there is a Hatch Act. You can wear your government title and role and do political activities and events. When Ivanka Trump gave that speech last night prior to her father, she was in clear and direct violation of the Hatch Act. There is no gray area there. She was simply in violation. And so was every other cabinet member who was in that audience. They were in violation of the Hatch Act. There is no gray area. That is the law. And again, if we are a nation of laws, then we need to govern ourselves according to those laws. There's no gray area.
Well, I guess I would ask one question of you, Eric. When the Democratic convention was held in 2008, and there were members of the State Department, employees of the State Department that spoke at that convention, was that a violation of the Hatch Act at that time as well? So just merely speaking at a convention.
Yes. Okay. Yes, well, they are in violation as well.
Well, I'll have to.
What we're saying here, hold on, let me interject here. What we're saying is two wrongs certainly don't make a right. So we can all say that the president here was in violation of the Hatch Act. I just want to put one other point in here too. We can talk about numbers all day long and percentages and stuff like that. But there have been people that have been staunch supporters of President Trump when it comes to his handling of this COVID virus that have died. One notable is Herman Cain, who came front and center. Herman is a Purdue alumnus. I don't know him well at all. Met him a few times, but he came there. He died. We had a person at the convention that spoke on behalf of Biden at the DNC convention, who said her father, his only pre-existing condition was trusting President Trump, and he paid for it with his life. The fact of the matter is here, when it comes to numbers here, we're 5% of the world's population and have 20% or more of the deaths. We have 180,000 people. I don't care what the percentages are. That's a huge amount. And we had Trump on record more than once, many times, saying, this is going to go away. We only have 5 people infected for it, 15, whatever it is. This is going to go away. This is a seasonal thing. It's nothing more than the flu. Come on. But let's move on from this one here, and let's talk about the economy. Trump has said that he has created the greatest economy in the world. And look, you can give him the pass, obviously, on this pandemic. This has wreaked havoc on anybody. You can't blame President Trump for COVID-19. We can blame him if you want to, his handling of it, but he didn't create this pandemic. But the economy itself, the greatest, well, a lot of people would dispute that. Some say as far back as 1953, we had a higher economic growth, the GNP, than we do now. James, I want you to address this first.
Well, you could certainly say one thing, that the economy of the first 3 years of the Trump administration was significantly improved, particularly in certain segments. You heard the president and many others in the Republican convention bring up the fact that unemployment numbers across the board were low, so far to the extent that we actually experienced the lowest unemployment numbers in the history of, since we've been tracking this in the United States, for minorities, for Hispanics, for Black Americans. So there is some muster behind the statements that the president has made that his economy was strong. Whether it was the strongest economy in the history of America ever, that's a tall order, because let's face facts, the United States is an economic juggernaut. And we have had some really tremendous boom economies. I mean, our economic might has saved the world several times over. The most notable is in World War II, where we outproduced the whole rest of the world to free the world of tyranny of Nazi Germany. So, I mean, is it on par with those other economies? I don't know. That's a question for the economists. But it was a very strong economy and was strongly improving.
Well, look, Eric, before you jump in, let me just say something to that. Look, you can talk about our economy and this country being a juggernaut. That's all true. I'm just going by what the president said, okay? He said that he has built the strongest economy ever. And even with unemployment was going down at least 7 or 8 years before he got into office. So he can't take credit for it because, he's not the catalyst of this. Jim, in any form or fashion. He talked about the unemployment numbers or the jobs gains, 9 million. Well, he failed to realize that 22.2 million jobs were lost during this pandemic. So these were jobs regained. So that's a lie. I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to let Eric take over.
Let me say this. The economy has been very strong under President Trump up until the pandemic. And we know that he inherited a great economy. In fact, the economy had seen more than 10 straight quarters of growth under Barack Obama. And so when Trump came in, he inherited a great economy. And I think he took it and he ran with it. Absolutely. But what Americans are looking for is not someone who can, create a robust economy, but they are looking for someone who can handle and deal with the unseen, the unforeseen, those things that were unexpected. And so we have seen right now the president actually have to confront a once in a lifetime pandemic. And as a result, and many Americans believe this, even polling data shows this, they believe this president failed miserably at this. And as a result, the economy has faltered. And now the question is can the president address and deal with issues that simply we don't know that will befall us, and how will he handle that? And we have seen this president simply walk away from the pandemic. We have seen this president not address this issue because, as Michelle Obama has said, he simply cannot. And therefore, the economy at this point is always going to limp along because the president simply cannot do what needs to be done to address what's actually hindering and hurting the economy.
I've got some figures here, and I want you to jump in on this, Jim, in terms of the amount of growth in the country and the economy under President Trump. I think it's the numbers here, if I've got it right here. His first 3 years, 6.6 million jobs added. And that's great. But prior to that, there were 8.1 million jobs added in the previous 3 years before he took office. These numbers, I guess you can dispute them, but these are coming from legitimate sources here. So again, has he done some good things? Well, yeah, but is it the greatest? No. And what he does, and what he says, and what he said last night, and he said this time and time and time again, he took over the shambles from the Obama administration. From what I know, and from what my own experience is, and from the people I know that I live and work with, the economy wasn't doing too bad under Obama. It wasn't in shambles. So again, you can fudge the numbers, you can do a whole lot of things here, but for him to say that this country was in just a bad way before he took over is a complete lie. I would dare say that as many problems as I might have had with Obama on a number of things here, he had a far worse time of it when he took over from Bush, with the banks and the situation they were in, and the economy. Not so with Trump. Just like with most of his life, he was born with money and a silver spoon, and he was given a silver spoon when he took office.
Well, I don't know if you could say he was given a silver spoon. I will acknowledge the fact that our economic recovery did begin before President Trump became president. And there were some very poor poor economic years at the beginning of the Obama administration, which is why you hear this comparison a lot to the last 3 years of the Obama administration to the first 3 years of the Trump administration. Because if you look at the full 8 years that Obama was president, it's a very mixed bag. But having said that, that's a historically accurate figure, that we were in a recovery before President Trump took office. However, what is unique is that President Trump was able to take what he inherited when he became president and continue to make smart decisions and do things to increase our economic growth. And particularly, and he keeps bringing this up, but nobody seems to want to take note of it, is that this economic growth touched all segments of the American economy in ways that we haven't seen before, which is why he had record low unemployment amongst Latinos and Black Americans, which is why you saw this increase in the manufacturing segment in this country during the Trump administration. That's unique. That wasn't present during the Obama administration. And had this pandemic not come when it did, there's a good chance that that trend would have continued and you would have seen even more economic growth. So the president does have some strong precedent in his favor in terms of what he was able to accomplish economically. That doesn't diminish what the Obama administration did before him, but he has some success unto his own right.
All right, here's what I would say to that. Now, and I can speak to this because you're up in Nashua, New Hampshire. But I'm here in New York City, and I travel to the hood regularly, especially on Sundays when I go to church. The numbers may speak that. But when I go out on the street corners of Bed-Stuy in East New York and Brownsville, I see a whole lot of people out there hanging out on the corners. I see a lot of people without work. I talk to executives here in nonprofit organizations, and they say they're struggling. I see gentrification coming into Black neighborhoods where you have now sidewalk cafes and stuff primarily inhabited by white folks. And I see a whole lot of Black folks disenfranchised. This is what I see with my eyes. This is what a lot of people here in the inner city see with their eyes, and I would dare say in every major city in this country. And we're talking about crime and drugs and everything else. He talks about these things running rampant under Democratic leadership, but makes no mention of the responsibility of federal leadership. See, these are the things that I have problems with. Eric, I don't know if you can say the same. I want you to comment on that briefly, but I want to move along here because we've got to wrap up. And I just want to talk about the social issues here that need to be addressed before we close this show. Eric, go ahead.
Well, I think what we saw from because we have heard the president talk about pre-COVID. You know, you can't pick and choose the points of your administration that you want to use to. You have to look at the totality of your administration. You are president today. You are president tomorrow. You are the president until January 20th, 2021. A pandemic is impacting the country on your watch. And so if that has an impact, so be it. You own that. You need to take accountability for that. You need to take responsibility for that. So whatever you had going until the pandemic, we have to take it all. Those 180,000 deaths, those occurred on your watch. And so you need to deal with that. You need to own that. And now we're dealing with a reeling economy. And so, yes, you own that as well. And so I think that's what the president needs to talk about. That's what the president needs to address, because, you know, we're a what have you done for me lately nation. And so we don't care about what took place pre-COVID. We're in COVID right now. How are you going to impact? How are you going to affect our daily lives based on what we're living with every single day?
You know, and Jim, I want you to respond to this as well. And Jim, look, you know, I've known you for a long time. You're a good friend. I'm not here to beat up on you. But what I'm here for, because you know that I was equally hard on the Democrats as well. But, you know, I do have a lot of problems with this president. Here's a guy who comes up here and talks about, what he's done to protect and safeguard the lives of people in this country. But yet and still, we still have no national mandate. Puts a lot of the burden on our governors, our local leaders. Some of that could be true, some of it maybe should be true, but no national mandate. Here we are now 68, 69 days or whatever it is before the election on November 3rd. And we have the CDC coming out now with different guidelines on what we should do to protect ourselves, which has a lot of health experts scratching their heads. President Trump said last night that he relies on science and data, but has consistently contradicted his health officials, Dr. Fauci, Feldman, Dr. Birx. And if I'm an American citizen and I'm looking at this of sound mind and body, which I think I am, at least partially, I'm saying to myself, well, what you're saying contradicts what you've been saying all along about what your health officials and science and experts have been saying. What am I losing here from the message that he says and comes out of his mouth and to what he has done in terms of mandates and science? Jim.
I don't think you're missing anything. I think what the scenario is, and let's face facts, if we look at what Dr. Fauci or what Surgeon General said in February of 2020, they have gone through several iterations and we learned different things about this pandemic, about COVID-19, and they've changed their tune. They said, masks are effective. No, wait a minute, masks are not effective. Oh, wait a minute, masks are effective. I mean, there have been several iterations. We are all learning. And I am hopeful that the president is doing the same thing, paying attention to what's going on, listening to the experts, and evolving his attack on how we're going to defeat this pandemic to make sure that we protect Americans as well as we can. If you listen to what he said in the convention, his sole focus now is to try and do everything in his power to get a vaccine to market in record time to keep Americans safe. For the love of God and for the health and safety of this country and the rest of the world, I pray that the president is right, and I can only hope that we're able to develop this life-saving vaccine so that we can restore some sense of normalcy back to the world. And I think the president is doing those things to try and greenlight it, because let's face facts, we've never had a vaccine that was ready to get through long-term testing within this period of time. This is record-breaking. So the president is doing some things. He may not be doing things exactly the way that some of his opponents on the other side like to criticize him for, but the proof is in the pudding. If this vaccine works and the president accomplishes this mission and saves millions of lives around the world, then there's going to be a whole lot of eating crow from his opponents.
Let's face some facts right now. There were a lot of people at the beginning of this pandemic that weren't sure what to do. Understandably, we've never had anything like this particular virus before. But as things evolved, even Governor Cuomo, who I've had a lot of issues with, that kind of downplayed this, got with the program. He listened to what the scientists said. And the epicenter of this virus back in February, he turned this around by listening to the scientists and the doctors and turn this into the model of what could be. That's a fact. And so he did turn around, and a lot of other people did too. And the scientists who were involved in trying to combat this thing, yes, this was a new thing for them, but they did change models. They suggested certain things, and the president did not go along with it. That is a fact. We've had people in here and governments, local governments, that had issues with getting PPEs. I know this for a fact from the health and hospitals of New York City. Private hospitals, nursing homes couldn't get equipment. The testing was still low. You can go to the White House now as a reporter and correspondent. You can get a test and get the results in one day. Just last week, I had a friend that got tested. He just got his results back, and it wasn't 2.5 and 3 days. It was nearly a week. So there's a disparity between those who have and have not. And no matter what you say or what the president says, the facts are the facts. And we got a situation now where we still have states that are out of control because no one knows what to do. We're not going to wear masks. We're going to wear masks, blah, blah, blah. It goes back and forth. So to me, he has been less than honest in his approach with this. And once again, whatever you can say, let's just go with these numbers. 180,000 people dead, over 5 million people infected. I don't want to hear it. You know, to me, it makes no sense. And you know, you can't put a price on that, especially when you're dealing with people who are dealing with the emotional after effects of this. And he mentioned nothing about this in his speech. And the only person that came close to showing any empathy about this was Melania Trump and her delivery, but nothing from the president on this. I just want to close with this because we're really going over here. Liz Black, our executive producer, is probably pulling her hair out. But I also want to talk about the situation at hand here with the social unrest in this country. The president has painted a dark picture on what he believes the country would be left with what he calls a left-wing Marxist, I guess, communist administration under Joe Biden. But my goodness, Joe Biden's not in office right now. Interesting that we have riots, as he calls it, in cities all over the country. People who are disenfranchised, who are complaining and protesting. And just the day before yesterday, one of his administrators said when it came to the NBA players protesting over this, he says, well, nobody cares about the NBA players protesting. Who cares about them? Well, guess what? I care about them. And you know why? Because they're Americans. How do you claim to be the president of all the people, and you can come out and have people in your administration say they don't care about protesters? Let them protest. They're un-American. They're political. And he said that about the NBA, but okay. The National Hockey League, Major League Baseball, soccer, the WNBA, tennis players, are they all political too? Do they matter? Do they care? Is the president wrong on this? Eric? I don't think Eric hears us.
Well, I'll jump in here.
Go ahead.
I do think they matter. And that's why I don't know what your sports teams are doing, but every sports team in the greater Boston, New England area has taken a stand in the Black Lives Matter movement. They've been supportive of the protesters. And I think that the majority of Americans at least hear the issues that are being voiced by the protesters and agree that some of the things that led up to us getting to this point are not things we can stand for. No one would stand up and say that the murder of George Floyd was justified. No one will stand up and say that the killing of Breonna Taylor was something that we should turn a blind eye to. So, I mean, I don't know what these particular Trump administration officials were thinking when they made that statement, but the majority of the country, Republicans, Democrat, independents, whatever, they're on board with trying to move forward with constructive solutions to the problems facing the day. And yes, I do believe that the president and I believe that his administration will support every American's constitutional right, including the First Amendment, which protects your right to peaceably assemble and protest so that your voice can be heard.
All right, that's going to have to be the end of it now. We've kind of run over here. Jim, I want to thank you so much. Eric as well. And well, I'm sure we're going to revisit these issues as we move along here. And then closing up here for me, it's really a simple thing. Either you are right or you are wrong. And in many of these issues, if you're dealing with the facts, there are no gray areas. I don't have a problem with people differing on policy and opinions, but the facts are the facts. And the president came out with a number of things yesterday that are just wrong. And you can't tap dance around this. There's no confusion about the numbers of people who have died in this country. There's no confusion about the number of people who have been infected with this disease. There's no confusion about unemployment numbers, what they are, what they were, what they should be. There's no confusion about social justice and people's right, as Jim says, with freedom of speech, where the president seems to disagree with that, saying, well, or people in his administration saying, well, they just don't care about them. Well, they should. This election probably will be the most important in our history. And I urge everyone out there to vote. I don't care what the option, 80, blind, crippled, or crazy. Get out there and vote. I'm not telling you necessarily who to vote for, but I do believe, based upon what I have seen, and trying to be on point, and dealing with both parties in my career, advising both parties. Yes, I've advised both the Republicans and the Democrats, but I've never seen anything quite like this. If you don't like Joe Biden, well, you know something? As far as I'm concerned, I'm not telling you to vote for, but maybe I am. I don't think we have a choice here. I just don't think that we do. Let's see what the next 60 plus odd days does, how things unfold. And we're going to keep you informed as much as we can here to keep you on point. Thank you for joining us this week, and we'll see you next week.